Ormiston SWB Academy, stands with other new structures in the centre of Bilston. It's an impressive building with its wood-clad exterior and the name in large letters for all to see. Inside, its cathedral-like atmosphere is bright and airy, with wide stairs leading to the top of its 4 floors. It's a far cry from the 2 schools that join together to form Ormiston SWB Academy.
Stonefield High School, which was also known as Hall Green High School and Parkfield Bilston High, stood where the AstroTurf is now. The school was still being used when this new building was under construction. The staff and students were able to see their future being built as they sat in class. Stonefield High School was built at the very end of the Victorian period in 1906 with decorative brickwork and high ceilings. It even had a couple of bell towers.
It was a great school, to be honest with you. It was very open plan. It was a massive building. When I was there was a primary school also at the end of it that got burnt down, I think.
We used to have to go have all your lessons in the main building, and then you'd walk down the slope across the fields right the way to the back to the dinner hall, and you'd have to line up outside in the rain and the snow.
I also remember the canteen, so we had the school canteen. They only used to let like a couple of children in at a time because there was always fights in there, and they used to give them paper plates with plastic forks and spoons because they couldn't trust them with the knives, so they didn't get knives.
Even the dinner halls, that was at the bottom of the field. So I can remember coming out of a lunch on the bell would ring, and we used to run down the side of the lane to get first in the dinner queue, because that was a completely separate building. It was a big old prefab building. I left there and I returned in 2004 as a site manager, and that was then Parkfield High School. I started as a 12-month gap fill sort of thing and never left. We had a fish pond right in the middle of in the old building, and when I started it was overgrown. You could hardly see the fish pond, and it brought back memories. So one of the first things that I done, I said I want to work on that fish pond, and I cleaned it all up. I painted it and got all the weeds, all the rubbish out of it, and turned it back into something back in the day.
Dad before me was a pupil there. 1915 my dad was born. So, and then when I went to have a look around the school, there was all cabinets with cups in, and my dad's name was on the cups. So I'd love to know what happened to those, because I'd love to see one of those. But yeah, so he should have gone to play for Portsmouth at football, but he had 8 siblings and they didn't get much money then for football, so he had to get a job. So that was a no, but all the cups was there with his names on.
Brian, the old caretaker, Brian Evans, he said to me, he says, no one's looked after that for years and years, we'll leave it alone. And I thought, well, let's get it up and running. And when I started cleaning it out, there's all fish in there. Nobody had fed them for about 10 years. And I remember when the school was being knocked down, we spent days trying to chase these fish out of the water, and staff was taking them home to the ponds.
But then it went to a infant and junior school, and I went there, and then up feeder school into the Hall Green, one of the feeder schools into Hall Green, because they was adjacent to each other, right slap back in the middle of each other. I went there from 77 to 82. Obviously, time there was, I enjoy my time there, to be quite honest. Looking back on it, school days are the best days of your life.
Made a lot of friends there, some I'm still in touch with. Smacking was allowed when I was at school, so I had my fingers in the desk a few times with the wooden lid dropped. That's how they used to do that sometimes. Boys had the cane.
I'm not one that was saying that I was a good lad, because I did get the slipper, I did get the cane, because it was caught, the teachers would be able to lay hands on you that time. So there was a cane for disciplinary, there was a slipper, ruler, and mostly anything board rubber. if that was at hand to the teachers as well.
Throw the board rubber at you a few times. I had that bounced off my head a few times. If you just look in the wrong way. Oh, I could draw a map of it. It's quite vivid, the building is. The science labs was up some stairs. You had to go upstairs to do science. And there's cooking rooms there. But then when it was things like art, we used to do pottery as well them days. It was art, pottery. We used to have to walk in our lunchtime all the way down to nearly the Birmingham New Road where the other school was, the annex. It was part of Hall Green, but it was on a different premises. So in our lunchtime, you had to spend your lunch, quickly get your dinner, and then walk all the way down there to get to school on time. And typing, when girls had to do typing, was down there. Art, all art was down there. Pottery, like hands-on things down there. So we used to go through a little gate right at the back where the dinner hall was, walk across some derelict fields, and I just remember heaps of soil, but it was black, so whether it come from the steel works, we used to walk all across there, all the way through no man's land. You wouldn't do it now. Cross the brook, we used to jump the brook and then get into the annex that way.
This weekly 2-mile round-trip walk was a regular part of students' life. It was completely unsupervised. It's difficult to imagine this sort of responsibility being given to students now, given that our roads are much busier and safeguarding has been put into place in recent years to protect young people.
It was really old, like it was extremely old. I used to think it was haunted. I mean, there was no sign of any ghosts or anything, not that I saw or heard, but it was like really old. It was freezing cold. It was just a really old, raggedy building, really. It was always had smashed windows, so every day, like the caretakers had to come and fix the windows, put some board up until they could get the windows fixed. So it was kind of that kind of school, really, really old. The classes was tiered like they are now, in like the higher classes to the lower classes, and I was in the top bands. So academically, I was fine and I was good, and I'd got quite a strict dad. So if anything gone home, there would have been problems. But I think the teachers were so strict, some of them, you were scared to speak to them. So I do remember a maths teacher, and I was scared of him. So if you didn't do your homework, you'd be in trouble, a lot of trouble. And I remember the once I was really stuck, so I got my cousin to help me, who was older than me, and I got it done. And that's when I had my fingers in a desk, because he kind of knew I didn't do it. And so I got into trouble for that. And then on another occasion, the same teacher ripped my work up because he said I couldn't have done it, but I did actually do it. And I remember thinking, oh, I did do that, and I had it ripped up. And so there is bad memories, and then there's also incredibly good at swimming. So by the time I was 12, I'd got all my golds, all my life-saving things, really stood out for swimming, and I should have carried it on.
I enjoy sports because I played for every school team that was going. Football was my passion. I played rugby as well, cricket as well, athletics, done that as well, and baseball and badminton as well. So it was quite any team that was going, I was used to trial out for, and normally I was used to get into it. I was captain of the football team in my first year at Hall Green. So that was good.
There was no like safeguarding as such as there is now, so you was allowed out round the town dinner time and go to the chip shop and get your chips and your sweets and then come back. A lot didn't come back, you'd have the afternoon off, but yeah, my dad was quite strict, so I came back.
Parkfield High School was built in the 1960s with extensions built in the 1970s. In the 80s, the main building had to be rebuilt due to mines in the area. The building is still there today, but Parkfield High School is no more.
we had a resident caretaker. Do you remember when they had resident caretakers in houses? And our resident caretaker was quite a funny chap. And one day the school staff, because the school staff had quite a few teams after school, like their football team and that, they'd had a football match. And the football, towards the end, had been kicked onto the top of the swimming pool. And one of the members of staff, they all went home, and one of the members of the staff thought, oh, I'll get the ball off the roof. Got on the roof, couldn't get off the roof, and trying to get off the roof, some people in nearby houses saw someone on the roof. So they phoned the police, and they went to the police. The police came and said, what are you doing there? And he said, I'm a member of staff, I'm just going to get this. And the caretaker obviously came out because he was by the house, and they said, this man on the roof, he says he's a member of staff. Can you confirm that? And Mr. Walker, the caretaker, looked at him and said, I've never seen him before in my life. I don't know who he is. I've never seen him. And he allowed them to take him to this member of staff, whose name I won't mention, to the gate before he said, actually, I do know who he was.
Going into my first lesson, and it was creative writing, and I was told about this one student, Ryan Forrester. I remember his name vividly, and they went, you'll have a nightmare with him, he'll refuse to take off his cap, he'll refuse to do anything that you ask, and it was very much this kind of negative impression. And I remember this first student walked in, multiple students were wearing caps at that point, so it was hard to distinguish who he may have been. There certainly potentially wasn't the immediate rigour walking around the building, the old school building of floors and corridors. I went, good morning, sweetheart. I said, come on in, take a seat. I said, just take your cap off. Got everyone in, sat down, did the register, did the lesson. It was as calming and chaotic as it could have been, given my first time in front of a room with all of these 16-year-olds looking at you when I'm not much older than them. But they received me very well. Did the register, kind of walked down, and you're trying to look at the names and look at the faces to know who matches because you don't know them. And I'm thinking, well, this is relatively easy, and I know that student has said they're here, and I think they've obviously told me a fib because everyone seems to be here, and he was there, and he was sat, he was the first student in, and he was compliant and pleasant and smiling. And I think for me, instantly I learnt that I'm never going to bring in judgments from other people's experiences.
The trips, we used to always take all the kids out on a trip at least once a year, always. Because of the catchment area we had, for quite a lot of kids, they'd never been to Seaside. They didn't know what Seaside was or anything like that. But when you think about how the trips were, you'd never do it now. You would never get away with it now. I mean, we used to take the kids on the train, for example, to Rhyl. We used to just walk to the station, get on the train, went to the station, went on the train, let them work in Rhyl and things like that. Or Blackpool, we went to Blackpool on coaches. We used to drop them off at the top pier, and then say, we'll see you in 2.5 hours at the middle pier, and then, well, we'll see you at such and such a time on the pier by the amusement arcade. And we never saw them in between unless we happened to come across them. And they just did these 3 little registers.
And everything was
fine. Everything was fine, but we took them loads of places on trips. They always went, not only to Seaside, but to amusement parks and everywhere. We had some really good trips. The staff were really good, and the kids loved it.
It was a traditional corridor, unlike the building that we have here, which is very open. And we used to have these competitions on World Book Day. So we had Wonkaland versus Wonderland. We had Gothic gangplanks. And I remember I dressed up as Frankenstein's monster. So I had this kind of full grey cheesecloth tunic and this full latex head. And I even went out on duty at the end of the day. We collected money. And I just grunted for kind of most of the morning to start with. And students were like, who's that? Well, it can only be Mrs. Hughes, who's the only one daft enough to do that, and kind of parents are getting involved, to the Diwali disco, such a rich kind of culture as Parkfields and what is SWB now that we've managed to maintain, to bringing in my toaster from home to make the kids breakfast in their old staff room.
I don't think we had to do the risk assessments to the same level at all. Nobody ever did a risk assessment about how you got on the coach or how you got off the coach or what you did in between time or, I mean, I went on and ran loads of trips, and we just had a list of names with phone numbers, house phone numbers obviously, or occasional mobile phone numbers, and off we set, basically. That was it. And you just assumed, you made massive assumptions that they were going to be okay.
My very last class, kind of English class at SWB on the Parkville Road, and my very first class in kind of W14 at SWB here will always very, very strongly stay in my memory. And what's really I'm really thankful for, some of my students now are 34-year-olds, you know, and live in another side of the world.
They had a massive Christmas party for pensioners, old age pensioners and things at Christmas, and it was a really big party. And you can tell that the times have changed, because one of the biggest excitements for the visitors when they came was halfway through when the sherry came out. And everybody had and you could see them go around. And some of them they used to say, if you were going around with the sherry, they'd say, "Is yours the Harvey's? Is yours the Harvey?" Or the cheap one from down the road. And there were loads of, you know, it was really good. It was a big thing. And the students did such a lot of work with it. They were the ones serving, they were the ones preparing. We had all that, and that was quite a long time before it became the vogue.
You know, so I'm now seeing students that have now got married and had their own children. And what's really scary for me is last open day in October, I had 17 students who were here whose children are now starting in September.
We had massive summer fairs on the fields with different stalls, loads of different stalls and games, and loads of kids involved. We had those for years. You can tell our summer fair, you could hear it coming down the school because we had the brass band. The brass band used to start picking up people on the way, as it were, and by the time they got to school, we had a load of people following the band into the school for the summer fair. We had hog roasts and everything. It was really a very big summer fair. We also had like productions, a lot of productions. The drama department, especially under a chap called Martin Morgan, who later went on, in fact, to become the head at Smestow School. And he'd put on really, really good shows involving loads of kids, and they were quality performances. And we had a lot of people do that. But we also had a different sort of performance in that we had the staff group and the staff band, and they performed and they were funny. They were talented, but they were funny, you know. And we had some really good staff events like that, staff quizzes, everything. There were lots of things that involved the school. You don't seem to get that staff event so much now.
Initially, Hall Green was merged with Colton High School, meaning students from Hall Green were bused to Colton for some of their lessons. However, Colton decided that they no longer wished to continue the link. So, a new partner was sought. Parkfield was an obvious choice as it was half the distance from Hall Green, making the busing of students for maths and English lessons much quicker.
Eventually, the decision was made by Wolverhampton Educational Authority to build a brand new school, an academy, which would accommodate all the students from Parkfield High and Hall Green. On the 31st of August 2009, both schools closed and OSWB was officially opened.
The popularity of Ormston SWB with its growing numbers shows the success that has come about by the merger of two of its former schools.